I am in the world-famous Broderick region of West Sacramento, which is known to be a Northano neighborhood. Interestingly enough, I'm over here in this neighborhood wearing blue, but that's neither here or there, nor is that the topic at hand that I'm going to discuss with you. What I'm going to discuss with you is real tough guys versus guys that are just faking the funk, right? And again, you come around a neighborhood like this, it's nothing but just straight tough guys over here, right? Some for the reasons of survival and some just for the sheer reason of chaos and causing such of that particular way of leaning towards life. But anyways, understand this. 3 things I want to talk about which sort of correlate to this subject. Number 1, Israel Adesanya getting into a fight at a parking lot or some kind of parking space of some sort, being confronted by what it seems to be somewhat of a gym bro type of guy, right? And these are usually the type of guys that honestly would pick fights, would train fighters outside of the cage and in the streets. Now, what about Nate Diaz getting into it with a bouncer? I'm going to talk about that as well. And correlating to all of that, how about Sean Brady? You see, he's complaining that a lot of people are slagging him off online. And I got to tell you, Sean Brady, that is part of the game. That's just the reality of it. A lot of these guys know that they're never going to beat you up in real life, nor would they even fathom the idea of challenging you head up. It would never happen because you look at Sean Brady, his appearance, his demeanor, the fact that he's from Philadelphia. And by the way, check out my breakdown that I have of his upcoming fight against Gilbert Burns. Before and after the fight, whichever comes first for you, to see if I have any sense into the breakdowns that I have put on for this weekend's fights. But nonetheless, a lot of people really live an easy life just sitting there talking behind your camera, talking behind your laptop, typing away and criticizing people that are searching for greatness. The whole idea of fraud check and what they're bringing into the whole table when they're talking about Sean Brady, on top of the fact that you got somebody like Israel Adesanya being challenged by a gym bro in the parking lot, and then Nate Diaz getting into it with a bouncer. Now, a bit of a different circumstance, because let's just be honest, right? In Nate Diaz's case, I gotta be honest, I don't know what you're doing at 39 years old at a club. Now, granted, me and Nate Diaz are the same age. We have a different life trajectory. On top of that, he has a different way of living his life weekend to weekend, which is what a lot of people like to go out and drink and this and that. A lot of people my age are still like that. The problem is, when is it going to be a focal point of which you're just going to stop and forget about the whole club scene? Is there a phase in that, or is this something that people are just always going to do? You look at some people out in the hood, for example, they got people out there having their parents or grandparents babysit their kids just so they can go out on a club or a concert or this and that. I don't know, man. It's a little bit kind of strange for me, but to each its own. However, if you're going to continuously perpetuate that kind of life, you're going to get yourself into trouble. It's inevitable. That's what Nate Diaz got himself into. Whether he was wrong or whether he was right, or whether the bouncer had any merit to his actions, or whether Nate Diaz had any merit to his actions. But what about Israel Adesanya? Okay, I think from the video that I had seen with Israel Adesanya getting into it, it looked like a New Zealand gentleman who looks like what I just mentioned earlier, a complete gym bro, goes and challenges him. And what does Izzy do in the process? He goes and he spits right on the floor and says, you know what? I can't really engage and hit you first. And you got to remember, New Zealand has stricter laws than, let's say, the United States, maybe even Britain. So he was very limited in the actions that he was going to do. Plus, it was being filmed on top of it, whether Izzy knew it or not. A lot of people don't know what mixed martial arts is, let alone really understand or know how to fight. So, due to that fact, do you think that they're really going to know who Israel Adesanya is or the depth of what he can do? This guy who's a little bit buff, he's looking at Israel Adesanya, tall, skinny, black guy, really not much. Maybe he's athletic, but not really strong. But what he doesn't realize is that he's dealing with probably one of the best strikers in the world, irregardless of what you've seen out of his subpar performance against Dricus du Plessis. He's still a dangerous weapon by the end of the day. Now, look, this is one of the beauties that I love about having a mixed martial arts channel that can sort of delve into other subjects. Well, why is that? For one, we're talking about a guy who just lost his fight. Nate Diaz, we're talking about a guy who literally loses almost all of his fights nowadays, right? Maybe not in recent times. Obviously, he did great against Masvidal. But for whatever reason, if there is a conflict going on in the streets and they get into, a little scuffle like that, it becomes an interesting story that we want to delve into, even though it has nothing to do with the competitive fighting in and of itself. But what does it really have to do? It is dealing with real life unarmed combat. And for whatever reason, sometimes that's even more intriguing than the actual organized combat that we had placed upon these two individuals at a given specific time and date and venue. For example, when Khabib fought Conor McGregor, obviously after that fight, what happened? They got into it after the fact. Conor McGregor got punched. He punched the other members of Khabib's team. It was a melee. And Dylan Dennis almost got eagle kicked by Khabib, the Eagle, Nurmagomedov. So that became an even intriguing point. And I guarantee you, right after that fight, just within that split second, I guarantee you the pay-per-view jumped even higher after the fact because people were being told, and all of a sudden they pressed that button, and just literally when the main event was over, people had already purchased the pay-per-view after the fact, knowing what was going on, and then rewinding back to the main cards, prelims, all the way to the end of the night where you had that melee. It was an intriguing point. But again, combat sports isn't always just about covering the winners or covering the champions. It's covering everybody else, whether it's through the thrill or the agony, as what you see in the UFC YouTube clips. So now, what can we learn from this? That there's a lot of people out there who are very ignorant to fighting, let alone ignorant to understanding mixed martial arts and the depth of what these guys can do. Did we also learn that there are people out there that are always going to criticize you no matter what you do? And anytime that you lose, it's a low-hanging fruit. Anytime that you win with a slight loss or a slight vulnerability, it is somehow going to be used as a low-hanging fruit against you because they just don't like you regardless. Is that what we learned out of this whole entire subject? Maybe. Did we also learn that there are people out there who have overinflated egos in terms of overestimating their ability? Now, here's the thing. There are guys out there, I'm going to be really honest with you, guys out there that I'm really scared of and can't fight. You want to know why? Because even though they can't fight, and even though I have that leverage over them, I still have to worry about the fact that they have other means of reprisals, if you know what I'm saying, right? So, again, a person doesn't have to know how to fight for me to be afraid of them. We're all afraid of the government, obviously, because we are not out there trying to piss them off, right? Obviously, if you're, a law-abiding citizen and whatnot, because violence is the ultimatum that comes with that, and something that most people don't want to face because they understand the consequences. However, there are people out there that are very ignorant to consequences. Either they've lived a very privileged life due to the fact that they've never really tasted that, or they've been in situations where they just felt like they could never be touched, and they keep dodging, slipping away, and being able to run roughshod without any particular pushback, right? So once again, what does that do? It overinflates your sense of ego. It overinflates your sense of understanding reality. And this is why you have guys like Izzy in that current situation that I'm talking about. And this is the reason why you have guys like Nate Diaz who are still going out clubbing at 39 years old, which ultimately just does nothing but bring you trouble. There hasn't been a time anywhere where anybody has gone out and just thought it's going to be an innocent night. There's a lot of things that are involved in that. There's egos involved. There's people that are G-checking each other. And then on top of that, there's people that are trying to look flyer than the other. There's jealousy that comes into that mix. And then there's comparisons, which, by the way, comparisons are what? Nothing more than the killer of all joys. So I think another thing that we can learn from this is that people are always going to be people, and there are people out there that will continuously make foolish choices. And here's what's crazy about that. Some people actually learn from it. They also repent from that and change the error of their ways. And then some people just stay static without any self-reflection whatsoever. So I'd like to go on and elaborate more on this particular subject, but there's nothing more to really say when it comes to why these people get into street fights with people they should never get into, and why they should also never put themselves in positions that are just going to lead them fighting bouncers like Nate Diaz. And as for Sean Brady, he needs to understand that this is part of the game. I think he understands that, but he is just addressing it days prior to his fight during media day. And he wants people to understand that, you know what? In a way, you're affecting me. Look, here's the thing, right? People pretend that what people say online doesn't affect them. It really does. I hate when people dismiss the idea that nothing penetrates them, right? And idealistically, nothing should. But what a lot of people don't really like to talk about is when that particular word that hurts so bad really penetrates your soul. Nobody wants to talk about that. Everybody wants to pretend that there's some sociopathic robot that has no feelings or reactions or any attachment to whatever it is that they've been called by, whether it would be a racial insult or a religious insult or some sort of sectarian vernacular form of verbal violence or altercation. People pretend that none of that hurts them. But in reality, it does. Because why else would we respond or do something about that particular language and that insult? Why would you not, in the name of honor culture, go after that person, right? If it doesn't hurt so bad. Apparently, I just don't think we like to reveal any of our weaknesses to anybody, and I think that's all right. The other thing I want to address on this is I think a lot of people also love to say that We should all address our weaknesses, especially in a public forum. I completely disagree with that. I don't think there's anything beneficial revealing your weaknesses to the world, because all it does is create a low-hanging fruit for people that already don't like you to use it and attack, and sometimes use it with no context behind it other than just to bring it up, just to have the moral high ground of a particular conversation or argument or debate or back and forth diss or whatever type of conflict you want to classify. So that is what's problematic about taking that approach. But other people think that showing your vulnerabilities to the world also sort of doesn't really give anybody the right to attack you back again. What is an example of that? Example, Eminem, right? 8 Mile. What does he do when he battle raps in the finals and literally disses himself before his opponent could get a chance to have his turn? And why did he do that? Well, as the ending goes, to shut him up, because everything that he wanted to say, he has already said. So therefore, you can't hurt him. In some instances, maybe there is some useful choice in that. But I strongly beg to differ. The idea of, oh, let's be vulnerable, show everybody our weakness or this and that. I don't agree with that. I just don't. And reason being is because I just think that there is an inherent bias that people already have, and they're just going to use that against you. So I want to move on to this topic with people that think they could fight, right? Because obviously this whole entire video is literally about that. People that think they can fight. So I'm going to put it like this, right? Most guys that are athletic in other sports, I've seen them come in jiu-jitsu gyms, boxing gyms, and try their luck, especially as a beginner. Now, you have to understand the guys that are really good at this, in fact, the majority of guys that are great at this have gotten their butts whooped early on, whether it was sparring or rolling sessions in jiu-jitsu. It's inevitable. But within that same inevitability, you gain skills and you start getting better as you're getting your butt whooped. And then eventually you're whooping butts that you wouldn't think you can. You know how to handle yourself with guys that are a little bit bigger. You know how to handle yourself with guys that have even more technical skills than you. Let's say if you have great attributes or great strength, explosivity, and stamina, and use that against an experienced and more decorated opponent or training partner. You start learning all these things. Most guys that were the so-called popular guys in school, unfortunately, a lot of them, they never got to learn this side of hardships and evolution as a fighter or as a martial artist, because their ego would not allow them to take that initiation and first step of getting your butts whooped into eventually graduating as the one who's kicking butt. They don't want to deal with that. It's very difficult for their ego. All their lives, they've been told, I'm great, I'm this, I'm that. You see a lot of these kids, they name is like King or some name of world leader or this and that, and they're somehow trying to, destine their kids into this type of Kanye mania or manic type of self-deluded reflection or opinions of themselves, right? This is why you have a problem with narcissism in society today, because you have a lot of people that encourage it. And this is where I'm going to land the plane on this one, which I think you guys are really going to understand in full context, okay? The reason why the world today is full of narcissists is obviously because of social media. Now, what is it that social media provides for our marketing to the world? They highlight our best, but they never highlight our failures. And as a result of that, we're creating this world where our egos are predicated on our highlights and best moments, but never the definition of the struggle, or let's say the hardships that we would never dare show to the world. And I'm not saying that that's the only reason why there is narcissism in the world, but I'm telling you there is a strong correlation to that. Obviously, there are other forms that may cause it, but it is a strong factor. And in translation to that, this is why most guys are not willing to go and train in gyms to get their butts whooped, and they never get better. And by the way, this talk that I'm telling you right now doesn't just pertain to civilians or people that don't train or people that are non-martial artists or people that have never competed. This also extends to guys that are in the thick of it. You know what I'm talking about. The MMA fighters who are great at striking and will never go to a wrestling class because they are afraid to look bad. They'd rather just go and stick with boxing and look good, jabbing people's faces away, but they never want to show the video or the training sequences of them getting slammed, taken down, put in mount positions, submission attempts being put on them, having to escape very precarious situations in the grappling exchanges and the scrambles. So these are all the difference. These are all the different things that you have to take into consideration. And a person with a big ego is not going to allow themselves to do that. So that mixed martial artist who's great at boxing never evolves into a great grappler. And that grappler who just relies on taking people down, and one can argue maybe that's just a better skill to have in the first place rather than just like trying to learn everything else on the fly, right? You take people down, you sort of control the fight. But if you can't strike, you can't defend yourself, and you can't put yourself in more leveraged positions. You're only reliant on one particular position. And it goes both ways. So don't get it twisted. Fighters also go through that in terms of not going through the hard practices because they don't want to look bad. They only want to do the practices that make them look good. But by the end of the day, you know what they say about ego, right? They say that ego kills your wisdom. But if you read that backwards, your wisdom kills your ego, because your ego ultimately doesn't serve you any good. So guys, that is the end of my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the latest videos that I've had in the catalog, from the video section to the live section. Also, check out my community tab. Turn on your notifications for all my upcoming videos. I've been posting videos daily, if not weekly or daily, but either way, I'm going to be posting content, lives, videos, and all the type of contents revolving around mixed martial arts and life lessons that you can take from it. I hope you guys enjoyed this content. I hope you enjoyed the scenery. I always try to give a different scenery every time I shoot these videos. And I do a lot of these videos on the fly. And you know what? This is one of the things that I can offer to you as a content creator. I'm random. You don't know where I'm going to be. I'm going to do things on the fly. And I think that right there pushes out more content. And not only that, risky content that many people will be intrigued by due to its raw and uncut entertainment. Like and subscribe to the most epic mixed martial arts channel in the history of mankind. Inshallah.